Booking a cab became easier than hailing one. Cars arrived in minutes. But behind the convenience, profits never arrived. Hi, I'm Shruti. Welcome to One Company, One Story. This podcast is about one company, decision taken by that company, and the lesson to be learned. Also, this podcast is based on publicly available information and is intended for educational purposes only. Uber is not a company. It is a ride-hailing technology platform that connects riders who need a cab with the drivers who want trips. Uber was founded in the year 2009. They promised faster rides, lower prices, and flexible income opportunities for drivers. In simple terms, Uber doesn't own cars. It runs on apps that helps people move from one place to another. How they grew so fast? Uber focused on scaling first rather than profitability. They expanded rapidly into hundreds of cities across dozens of countries, quickly attracting millions of users worldwide. This fast growth was largely driven by heavy discounts offered to riders, generous incentives paid to drivers, and aggressive entry into new markets. In simple terms, Uber paid people to use Uber in order to go as quickly as possible. So what was the core problem? The core problem was every ride cost money. For Uber, what was the every single ride cost money? See, for each trip, Uber had to pay the driver, maintain and upgrade its app and technology, handle customer support, and cover insurance and safety-related expenses. At the same time, customers also expected rides to be cheap and constantly compared Uber prices with the traditional taxis in competing apps. This pricing pressure meant Uber often earned less from a ride than it actually spent to deliver it. In layman terms, the more people used Uber, the more money the company lost, turning growth into a financial problem rather than a solution. Competition made Uber's path even more difficult because it was never operating alone in any market. In India, Uber faced strong resistance from Ola. In China, it competed with Didi. And across Southeast Asia, it battled Grab. Each of these companies understood their local markets better, had regulatory support, and were willing to fight aggressively for market share. To survive in these regions, Uber had to increase discounts for customers. They pay higher incentives to drivers and spend heavily just to stay relevant. This strategy helped Uber grow user numbers. But it also meant burning large amounts of cash with very little return. As competition intensified, Uber realized that winning every market was neither cheap nor sustainable. In some countries, the cost of fighting local players became so high that Uber chose to step back rather than continuing to lose money. It sold its operations, exited certain regions, or merged its business with competitors in exchange for equity. These decisions showed a harsh reality of a global expansion. That is, scaling a platform business is extremely expensive when every country pushes back with its own competitors, regulations, and market dynamics. When Uber eventually went public, the rules of the game changed. As a private company, losses could be explained as growth investment. But once listed, those losses become visible to everyone. Investors were no longer impressed by user numbers alone. They wanted profits. Growth by itself was no longer enough. This pressure forced Uber to make uncomfortable decisions. The company had to reduce driver incentives, increase price for riders, and cut operating costs across markets. These changes slowed down growth, but they were necessary to make businesses more sustainable in long run. At the same time, Uber placed big bets on a future to justify its massive scale. The company believed that self-driving cars would eventually remove its biggest cost, driver payments, and turn every ride profitable. It also expanded into food delivery through Uber Eats, hoping that multiple services on the same platform would diversify revenue and reduce dependence on ride-hailing alone. Uber further believed that the sheer scale would eventually bring efficiency and lower cost. Some of these bets worked partially, while others remained uncertain even today. In simple terms, Uber kept betting on tomorrow's solution to survive today's problems. The lesson to be learned from the Uber's journey is very clear. Growth creates attention, headlines, and a market dominance. But profitability is what allows a business to survive longer terms. Uber mastered the art of scaling quickly across the world. But turning that scale into a consistent profile proved far more difficult than getting users in the first place. So that was Uber, scale without profitability. The next episode is about Netflix, content before cash. This is Shruti signing off. See you in the next episode of One Company, One Story.